Malaysia faces as a developing economy. We move to our second session, which is the Q&A. I think all five speakers this morning and just now, three excellent talk and presentation on setting the landscape, the global change challenges and how that impacts the region. But what I'd like to probe in the discussion is how do we actually do it? Because I think a lot of it is still at a very 30,000 level, and we've got a lot of practitioners here. How do we, as industry associations, policymakers, build this resilient ecosystem that we're talking about? I think in all the discussions, we talked about technology, innovation. I think Constantine talked about the declining population, and for the economies to sustain growth, productivity is really important. But what we are also seeing is that corporate R&D in the region, particularly in Malaysia and ASEAN, is relatively low. I think Prof. Anil and some of them touched on. How do we build innovative capacity within the industry for industries to move up the value chain quickly? As a matter of fact, leapfrogging, and that will require major injection of capital, building talent. How do we essentially build that multi-stakeholder partnership model with respect to building this ecosystem that is agile, resilient, but also futuristic? So maybe I want to start off with Chris, since from the industry perspective, what are the best practices that across the globe in developed countries, seeing some of the challenges that's coming from Asia, industries are doing to build this ecosystem?
Yeah, I think it's an excellent question. I'll probably take a leaf out of Deloitte's page, if I may. Our theme in the Asian region is stronger together. And to be able to do that, we have three buzzwords, which are connected, collaborative, and automated. I think unless we're able to create that kind of ecosystem where parties can come together and are able to move forwards together, then obviously it becomes very difficult. So let's take an example. If you've got an entrepreneur that's come up with a great idea, but there isn't a regulatory framework that allows them to move that idea forward, whether it's from the point of view of R&D, IP, access to the right human capital, because the requirements in today's world are very different moving forward, and the financing on top of that, then obviously it's going to become very difficult. So I think we've got to come together to create that ecosystem so that we can move forward, and we'll all benefit together in doing so.
Prof. Anil, would you like to say a few?
Yeah. So what I would like to do is pick up on the human capital story, because let's just take two of the big economies, highly successful economies in Asia, Japan and South Korea. So if you look at Japan and South Korea, they basically don't have any natural resources unless we are talking about seafood. But what's the Japan and South Korea story? It's really about human capital. And in particular, both are very impressive, but South Korea I find in some ways even more impressive in recent years, because if you go back to the mid-1980s, late 1980s, you had the rising China with low cost, and you had the mighty Japan with high technology. And so South Korea seriously ran the risk of being squeezed between the high-tech Japan and low-cost China. And South Korea could have really gotten stuck, the middle-income trap like nobody's business, but they made it. And what they made it, as I understand, is that really they went like a madman, if it is in a good way, is to go high-tech. And so as they're a smaller economy than Japan, as percentage of GDP, they outspent Japan. And the result is, of course, all the Korean giants, whether it's Samsung or LG or others. And in fact, if you look at some of the countries in the world that are in difficult times, those are countries that are rich in natural resources. You look at Brazil, Venezuela, you look at many countries in Africa, it's so-called the resource curse. So I think human capital, just looking at the US, physical infrastructure, or UK, if you were talking about, Chris, the physical infrastructure really is crumbling. But the US economy continues to power ahead. It's because human capital in the US, whether it's Silicon Valley or Boston, is phenomenally strong. Now, so when I look at emerging Asia on human capital, I think these are glorious times. When I say glorious times, is because to move ahead in terms of building literacy, but also not just language or communication, but also technical literacy. Now the cost of building that education and literacy is coming down dramatically. And what's happening is really the rise of free online courses. And I'm not talking about, kind of very simplistic elementary kind of education. So Google, has annually for high school kids, summertime, you can come and be a Google fellow. And of course, it's brutal competition. And they get, whether it's, every year somebody from Nigeria or Egypt, and so on, and they haven't gone through necessarily the best technical education, but they are self-trained online to make it. And that kind of online education, it's like the head of Stanford's AI lab, Andrew Nunn. He has one of the most popular courses on Coursera on machine learning. So what's happening is that the supply side of education, including technical education, is becoming almost free. And so what governments need to do, whether it's in India, Malaysia, etc., is to generate the demand side, make sure, and rethink the business model that we need to have these brick and mortar schools and hire teachers. If in India we wait for that to happen, we would be waiting 100 years and it still wouldn't happen. Just as one final thing on that is, one of the most exciting, one of the best high schools in the US is called Stanford Online High School. And it's run by Stanford School of Education. And it's phenomenal, and it's pure online. And so you have no physical building at all. So if you can create a purely virtual, top-ranked high school from Stanford in the US, that business model can be implemented in any corner of the world.
Thank you. Of
Well, education in this country certainly needs root and branch reform. The lost boys phenomenon that Guru described to us cannot just be said it's because young men are too hormonally driven, so they lose patience and they drop out of schools. The reason is the schools teach them things which they see as useless and marginal to their lives. Why should they waste their time memorizing stock answers to an education which in the end don't prepare them for jobs? So the key there is not that we have to do something on the education front, and as I've said, Malaysian scores are very low compared to the rest of the world, given how much we are spending on it. The education, Lin Xian talks about the aging problem. What it really means is that we got to have lifelong learning. And learning education, the investment in human capital is just not education. It's also in public health. There's no point in living longer if you live in pain your whole life. So what I'm coming to is that the investment in human capital is not just education, but also public health in a big way. And how should we provide that the investment in human capital? We look at the universities and the government in providing it. I think that's not enough. What is still in shortage are good ideas. And how do we get good ideas? We have good ideas when there are different types of suppliers of education. I think that when you look at the most advanced countries in the world other than Europe, you look at countries from the US onwards. The top universities in the US are mostly private, with Berkeley being the exception. You look at Korea and Taiwan, the top university in Korea is usually seen as Seoul National. What's number 2 and number 3? That is Korea University, a private university. Yonsei University, a private university. How about Japan? Tokyo University. How about the other 2? Waseda and Keio. Basically, in every society, there are people who wish to leave a legacy. In the old days, people built churches. Nowadays, you leave good universities and good hospitals as you part of your legacy. And this because they have to compete against the subsidized private universities, public universities. They have much more incentive to be innovative. And I think that Malaysia should not make the mistake of Taiwan. You cannot think of an outstanding private university in Taiwan because they are overregulated. And similarly, Malaysia now runs the risk of overregulation of the private universities and hence harming that investment in human capital.
Thank you. Tan Sri Lin? It's working.
It's on? Yeah. We have to be practical in order to create an ecosystem. We talk of moods, right? Harvard just finished a review of 4 years of moods. They found that the average attention span of the guy who listens to MOOC is 4 minutes. After 4 minutes, he's off to the fridge, he's looking at television, all that. The point is, if you want moods to be effective, and by the way, I'm #1 on education, you have to change the way you teach moods. The curriculum, the way. And so at Harvard, I know they're experimenting. The way they teach moods today is like a Hollywood studio. They set up a Hollywood studio with cameras, with screenwriters, and even professors have to sing to get attention. The point I'm trying to get at is, moods uses technology, but we don't know how to use that technology. We have to invest in making moods more effective than what it is today. For Malaysia, it's very simple. Malaysians only understand brutality, tough things. So the only way to get about this is first, get rid of imported cheap labor. Force the industry. The moment you mention this, the construction industry, who's going to build our industry? Of course, there are alternatives. Technology, new architecture, and things like that. But so long as you have the cheap alternative, you never get up the value chain. You never. That's why we need to be tough. So for Malaysia, first step to do, get rid of cheap labor. The only cheap labor we should get in is to help households so that both husband and wife can work. Yeah. Because don't forget, I mentioned that point, we don't have population growth to propel GDP growth. We only have productivity. If you get into it early enough, GDP will decline. That's it.
Thank you.
Basically, lean on what Tan Sri mentioned. Certainly, we want more inclusion of our human capital. We want to make sure we advance technologically. But if you don't set right the key fundamentals, the key authority governing TVET, for example, how you want to make sure that the different levels, right now for TVET you have level 1 to level 5, but we don't have beyond that up to level 8 as in the case of Germany. So you have to also understand what is the market out there, what are the types of students you're dealing with, and then of course from there plan out accordingly. Because sometimes you mentioned just now, Prof, you mentioned just now about we have this 30 feet kind of viewpoint. But when you look down, what are the key steps that has to be done now, the first month, the next 6 months, before you can achieve that particular vision? So I completely agree, but if we don't bite the bullet, we're just going to be talking about this grand ideas and then keep shifting from 2020 to 2015.
Thank you very much. I think, the discussion of talent is a major issue. But one of the things that we hear is that while talent is really important at the high level, but there's this chasm between what's needed by industry and what we are producing. There's a whole, a lot of discussion on, strengthening the triple helix and quadruple helix and so on. But there are some good models, and if you see the Small Business Innovation Research framework in the US, you can Google that, where state universities become the knowledge centers for the communities they are on. So it's not just your Berkeleys and others, but public funding is channeled through the universities to support the local community. I mean, small businesses that don't know how to do business plans or develop their technology, or don't know how to adapt the technology from someone else, these universities, state universities, can play a key role. And many of the countries in the region have got very good public institutions. So the cost of capital of building this back is not that high. So looking at the Small Business Innovation Research, the other one is the Manufacturing Extension Program in the US that has spearheaded some of the technological revolution by small startup companies. So just, and a recent study in Malaysia shows that businesses tell that Malaysian graduates are very good in absorptive capability. There are 3 levels. They're good in taking instructions, but in terms of adaptive and innovative capability, it just falls short. So clearly, I think we're doing the fundamentals, but somehow the problem-based learning, which the problems the industry has, is not connecting. Perhaps, maybe, how do we move forward? How do we actually bring down the 30,002 quick wins that governments can immediately implement? Say, look, the KPIs for the rectors in the various universities, this is what should be. It's not just top-tier publications, which are really important. How do you solve a problem using fundamental research, but having the translational impact of getting to the publications, but also have that impact on the ground? Would you like to say? I think that's the model that you're talking about, the different business models of education.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, just to add to this, I was just thinking that building on the arguments I was making in my presentation, that we can say, and definitely for countries that have very good infrastructure or better, Malaysia being very much part of that we are moving towards, as a country, as a society, towards an asset light. Because technology, essentially, we talked about cars and highways and all of that. Now, if we move towards a more asset-light economy, because of the power of technology, one could imagine that in terms of the macroeconomic policies of the country, that just as an example, you say, let's kind of target 1% less investment in physical infrastructure, because we become more asset-light, and put that money towards education, okay? Because, the implications can be phenomenal, okay? That's one part. The second part is that on the education side, looking at supply and demand, the place where today, because of the MOOCs and better versions of MOOCs, and like in India, what's happening is that master teachers in local languages are being funded by foundations to develop phenomenal courses, and so on. So the supply side is being taken care of. Is really the focus on the demand side. And just very, very briefly, when I talk about demand side, you take, the most competitive, the Olympiads, or you take Caltech or Berkeley, where, by policy, they don't have any ethnic diversity quotas. That 40-50% of the admitted students are of Asian Americans. And they go through the same school system, but it's in the homes, it's the demand that, you better study hard. It's the demand side, okay? And so, and you look at South Korea, they have these private schools in the evenings, and they study till 10 and 11 at night, and so then the